Well, we know that we're going to install this endpoint agent onto a PC, and it's going to start to evaluate the data that is flowing between the endpoint and the rest of the network. And we're going to talk about the traffic and the data that it's capturing here coming up shortly. But for right now, we need to understand a little bit more about the architecture of this endpoint agent that's running here on this endpoint. And what we're going to find is that the agent actually consists of 4 different components that are all running and working together in order to perform all of the actions that it needs to take. So first of all, we have the system service. The system service is sort of the base agent software that's running. Its job is to collect data from the endpoint, but it's also responsible for checking in and making sure that there are no configuration changes. And if there are configuration changes, then we need to enforce those. And so this is going to be checking in with the ThousandEyes backend to make sure that it's doing everything that it's supposed to be doing. Now, what are some of these configuration changes that we might be making? Well, we'll explore those coming up. But as you can imagine, that we as admins, we might be logging into ThousandEyes, and we might say, hey, we want to capture this type of traffic now. And so that's going to be what the agent is checking in on to find out, hey, are there actual changes that have been made, and what do I need to do, again, from a configuration perspective here. So that's the job of the system service. And again, it's sort of the base package of what's running here on the endpoint once we install the agent. But there are additional components. A big part of what we're going to be evaluating when we're looking at this traffic going back and forth is especially going to be web traffic. So we need to keep that in mind. Web traffic is going to be a big part of our evaluation because, first of all, if we think about it, a lot of our software as a service types of applications are actually in web browsers these days. A lot of our experience from a user perspective who's using this endpoint is going to be viewing a lot of web traffic. And so if there are problems with accessing an application, those problems are probably going to be first noticed inside of the web traffic itself. So the second component that we have here is going to be a component known as browser helper. Browser helper is the part of the agent that is going to allow us to collect browser data. Now, it's not going to do it alone. We're going to find that we need a browser plugin as well, but when it comes to actually collecting the data from that particular component, it's going to be the browser helper that not only collects the data, but also sends the data. It's going to send that data to ThousandEyes, and again, it's in communication with the ThousandEyes cloud in order to make this happen. It's also going to be responsible for initiating tests. So if we, as an admin, decide that, hey, yeah, we might push changes down, but what if we want to trigger a test? Well, the test is going to be initialized by the browser helper component because it's going to interface with this third component, which is very important, and that is the browser extension. So these two components, even though they are distinct from one another, they are going to work together. Importantly, by the way, the browser helper is going to be part of the installation of the agent along with the system service, as well as the fourth component, the update service. But the browser extension, this is an independent installation with a slight caveat. But either way, we're going to find that we need to make sure that the browser extension is actually installed. And for the most part, we're going to be talking about Chrome or Edge browsers when it comes to the independent installation of a browser extension. So you might say, okay, so now I've got this browser extension. It's installed into, let's say, my Chrome web browser. How is that different from Browser Helper? Well, Browser Helper is not actually running inside of the browser. Again, we're going to see some tight integration here between these two, but they are individual software components. The browser extension, on top of being independently installed, I'll say independently installed there now, and on top of being independently installed, it's going to perform the capture of our web traffic. Now we get to define what web traffic gets captured and what web traffic doesn't get captured. Generally, we don't want to capture all of the web traffic. We just want to capture traffic going to known applications. Again, think about a user going out to a software as a service type of application. At that point, we would want to make sure that that SaaS application traffic is being captured. But we don't necessarily want to capture the web traffic of them going to their favorite news site, because if the news site is having problems, we don't have any responsibility to try to fix that. Now, the fourth component is going to be the update service. The update service is appropriately named. It doesn't take much explanation here, as you might guess. Its job is to update the endpoint agent on an as-needed basis. So the way this works is it's going to watch for updates. It's going to download those updates. And when ready, it will deploy the updates. Now, here's the thing about this. It's going to, first of all, watch for updates. It's going to check in every 4 hours. And if it does find that there's an update out there, then it's going to download that update. But it won't install it right away. It's actually going to watch for an opportunity to do so. So it's going to deploy at an opportune time, we'll say. So what defines an opportune time? Well, an opportune time is more or less when the endpoint isn't being used from a web traffic perspective. So it's especially going to be looking for web activity to be stopped. And it might prompt the user for this if it doesn't happen soon enough. It's going to have a timer that it's counting down, and eventually it's going to say, hey, we need to update this. So let's close out of the web browser, perform the update, and fire the web browser back up. Now, one thing to note between these two conversations. So I mentioned this briefly, but when it comes to Chrome and Microsoft Edge, which is their more modern web browser, these are going to be independently installed. However, we might have a little bit more of a legacy type of environment with Internet Explorer. Now, Internet Explorer is pretty outdated at this point. And I imagine the reason why Thousand Eyes still supports it is just because it's still in use, probably more in use than Microsoft would even desire. So if we do have Internet Explorer in our environment, we can install it, and it actually gets installed as part of the agent. So the agent is going to deploy the system service, the browser helper, the update service, and it can install and manage Internet Explorer's browser extension. And so at that point, when we're talking about, hey, performing an update, Internet Explorer will be updated along with the rest of the agent components when an update is available. However, when it comes to Chrome and Edge, because they're independently installed, they will also be independently upgraded. And they'll be upgraded via their independent stores. So think about the fact that Chrome and Edge, they both have plugin stores, extension stores that we can log into. We can see all of the different extensions that are out there. And so the upgrade will happen as part of the normal processes for those browsers. But do notice in all of this that there are a few browsers that are missing, especially notably Firefox, as well as Opera. And yes, also notice that Safari, which is the popular web browser on Mac devices, is not supported as of the time of this video. Meaning that even if we do have a Macintosh environment and we're typically going to run Safari there, we would still need to deploy Chrome or Edge onto the endpoint in order to support the full browser capabilities that we would expect out of Thousand Eyes. So let's make sure that we understand the four main components of the Thousand Eyes endpoint agent that gets deployed onto our endpoints, as well as the browsers that they support and the browsers that they don't, again, as of this point in time.